leads me back to our next artist of the science, Durgica Marozovic, or DJ. DJ did her PhD in microbiology and now works for the Bavarian Health and Food Safety Authority in public health as a microbiology and epidemiologist. Today, for you, and only you, our dear listeners, DJ will present the fabulous and greatest pageant of all pageants, the Microbe pageant.
Have you ever watched beauty pageant contests such as Miss Universe and Mr. World? When I was young, this was not only my favorite pastime with my friends to just watch it, we reenacted the whole scenery. We were walking the walk, we were talking the talk, we were evaluating ourselves, and we were, how is the hair, how is the makeup? We did everything. So we played both the contestants, but as well as the jurors. And I'm lucky enough to continue this in my everyday job even now. Although my contestants are not anymore human. What I do now is I work as an infectious disease epidemiologist, which means I look at the bugs and microbes that can cause diseases and make us people sick, and I look into that. How do they do that? What do they do? And which one of those is the most dangerous? So now I want you to be my jurors today in this microbe pageantry. We have today 3 contestants. We have measles, we have salmonella, and we have malaria. And our 4th and honorary guest, due to physical distancing rules, is not present in real life, but via video call. It's SARS-CoV-2. So, let us know, what do you think? Who is the most dangerous? Who will win this microbe pageantry out of our 3 or 4 contestants today? And please ask away any questions that you want to have answered about those bugs in the comment section so that we can discuss it later. So as every beauty pageant has more rounds of evaluation, that's what we will do now as well. So first off, we will look at the number of people who get sick. Who of those microbes, which of those microbes will get the most people sick? So in this round, the winner, the ultimate winner would be malaria. Because in 2018, more than 228 million people got sick of malaria. Salmonella got only 90 million people sick, and measles got 9.7 million people sick. But it's not only that they get you sick. I am sure you remember also that it's not the same if you just have the sniffles and can walk around and all about your day, as it is when you get a stomach flu or high fever and you have to spend the whole day in bed. So the next thing that we want to look at is how sick do these bugs make you? And we evaluate this by looking at how many people really die. How many people got so sick that they die at the end due to this disease. And the number that we use for that is called lethality or case fatality rate. So how many cases of sick people really die in the end, to evaluate which of those bugs is the most dangerous. And in this section and in this category, measles would be the winner, because measles has a case fatality rate of 1.5, while the other 2 have it 10 times less. So this means that even though in 2018 salmonella had 10 times more people, got 10 times more people sick, approximately the same amount of people died due to measles and salmonella in the same year. So as you can see, we only have these 2 factors that we evaluate now, but it gets already tricky. What has more value? How do you decide which one is most dangerous? And the same goes, these are only 2 factors. We have different other factors that we can evaluate. For instance, which one of those makes you sick the fastest? Salmonella would win. Which one of those gets the most people in the same room sick if there is just one sick person inside? Measles would win. So It seems, I would say, rather unfair because all of these microbes are so different and they have so much variability within them to compare them amongst each other. And what we do in our everyday work is actually we don't compare them with each other. We take one microbe and compare those factors and the numbers of sick people or people, how many people died per year this year, and compare it with the same bug from last year and the year before and the year before. And due to that, we can see whether the bug gets more dangerous or less dangerous over time. And if you think about it, that's actually the same way what you would apply also in your life every day. Because in order to know how much you've grown, how much you've changed, and how much you've learned, you wouldn't compare yourself in a beauty pageantry contest style. You would compare yourself with your past self, with how much you've learned in the last year and how much you've grown in the last year. And if you're now wondering what it is with our honorary guest, SARS-CoV-2, well, that's exactly the reason, the comparison with our past selves, why we as scientists have a bit difficult time to answer now how dangerous is SARS-CoV-2 or coronavirus, because we don't have this historical data. We don't know. It's new, and we don't know how it would have behaved last year. What we only can do is compare it with their closest relatives. So, for instance, if I would compare you with your siblings, with the height or the hair color of your brother or sister, and this gives us a quite uncertain result, because you can be very similar to your siblings, but you can also be quite different. And unfortunately, I cannot tell you now who is the most dangerous microbe, because as you can see, it's very difficult to compare them amongst each other. But I'm sure we can all agree that the title of the influencer of the year 2020 would definitely go to SARS-CoV-2 coronavirus, because it impacted and influenced our life the most in 2020.
Thank you, DJ. This was really interesting talk describing the different microbes and viruses and how they originate their diseases and how we should not maybe compare them. Super interesting. By the way, by public vote, the most impressive microbe is... Any guesses?
I guess the influencer of the year?
No, measles!
Measles! I'm so happy!
Measles actually won.
I'm so happy because that is also one of the microbes that is actually very dangerous nowadays. We just forgot about it because we have something that can help us with measles, and that's vaccines. And that's why we don't see it that often, and that's why we don't have it so often in our minds. But I'm very happy that our listeners and people who watch this realize this.
But measles, you said we have a vaccine, and we have heard some news about the anti-vaxxer movement, especially in the US. Is also in Europe starting to get some traction?
Yes. There is always this small percentage of people who are very loud on social media or on the internet and that are providing false information or that are questioning the vaccine and what should be done about that. Luckily, we are still very good in Bavaria and Germany with the vaccination going on, but we've realized and we've seen that the anti-vax movement is getting traction and is getting more and more attention in the media.
Still on the measles, Johanna on Facebook asks us if it would be possible to eradicate measles as we have done with smallpox.
Yes, we are trying to do that. That was the goal of the WHO recommendations in 2015, to eradicate measles by 2020, because it's similar to smallpox, because it can infect only humans. It doesn't have a reservoir that's called an animal that can also transmit the disease. So that's why diseases that don't have reservoirs other than human are very good candidates for the eradication. Unfortunately, we are still quite away from eradicating and eliminating measles, because one of the reasons is the anti-vax movement, because people start to doubt it, and that's why we didn't get rid of it until now, although the WHO recommended and anticipated to do so by 2020.
There's actually a very interesting question from Judy in YouTube. She is also a good way for you to explain how you know so much about these diseases. She specifically asks, what exactly is your job at the Bavarian Food and Health Safety Authority, which is a gigantic name?
Yes, in German, it's almost one word. So my job at the Bavarian Health and Food Safety Authority is that I am an infectious disease epidemiologist, which means that I evaluate the numbers, and I evaluate how many people got sick of these different diseases. And we publish papers on that, and I have a microbiological background, which also helps me a lot when evaluating those numbers, not only statistically, but also having this biological background and microbiological background in mind. So we do weekly evaluations, we do monthly evaluations, we do yearly evaluations, and not only routinely, but also we investigate their different outbreaks. For instance, if we have a school class that all got sick with diarrhea, we go in there and ask the people and ask the children, what did you eat? What did you do the last few days? And we try to find the culprit of those diseases. And then we can say, hopefully, okay, all of you got sick because all of you ate the tuna sandwich, for instance, 2 days ago, and it seems like the tuna sandwich was spoiled with some of the microbes, so that made you all sick. So that is also part of my work. It's called not only the surveillance, so the analysis of the data that comes in every day about how many people got sick per day, per year, per week, but also doing this outbreak investigations, like real detectives. We go in there and ask and look for the culprit, look who's responsible for outbreaks.
Still within this line of question, Mar in Facebook wants to know, you do all of this study, and then what do you do with this information? Do you advise politicians?
Yes, exactly. So we have not only a role as scientists, but also as policy advisors to the Bavarian Health Ministry and also to the higher politicians there. We give them recommendations, which vaccines are, for instance, important to implement, or which recommendations should go on for hand hygiene in schools, for instance, or hygiene for preparation of food in schools, and different stuff like that. Yeah. And
now, of course, we will have to ask some questions about virus, because this year is in everyone's mind. So Isabel in YouTube asks us, do virus also evolve to be less dangerous over time? She says she would expect them to become less dangerous.
Exactly. It is possible that some of the viruses or some of the bacteria as well evolve to become less dangerous, because the virus's goal is also to survive, and the virus survives the best if the virus is the best adapted to its host. And in this case, we are the host. The virus makes us sick, and if we are not so severely sick, and if we don't die, the virus has a better chance to get transmitted further and further and further. That's why viruses can evolve to cause less diseases, to cause less severe diseases in humans, in order to improve their fitness and in order to improve their transmissibility. So how many people they can get sick and how many viruses can then be produced. Because if they make us very sick, and if we die due to the course of the disease, then this means also death for the virus, because it cannot get spread further and further away.
Is this the same reason why some of your examples are very lethal and they don't spread so well? So your measles, it's very complicated. But the coronavirus actually spreads a lot, and most people don't really have that most people don't have critical symptoms. Is that the reason why the coronavirus spreads like wildfire and the measles not so much?
No, the reason why the measles doesn't spread so much as the coronavirus is actually the vaccine that we have. Because if we wouldn't have the vaccine for measles, they would spread even faster than the coronavirus now. That's what I said. This is the great success of vaccination, and that's why we don't have it in mind that measles is such a dangerous disease. Because if we wouldn't have this opportunity, if we wouldn't have this vaccination, it would be even more dangerous and spread even faster. And the reason, the hypothesis, what we consider now why SARS-CoV-2 spreads so fast is because it is new. So we've never been in contact with it, and none of us have any immunity. None of us have any, let's call it, resistance towards the virus. So everyone can get sick. If we have, for instance, the yearly flu, the influenza, in the population, some people got influenza last year. Some people got influenza 2 years ago. Some people got the influenza vaccine. So the people who are susceptible, we call it susceptible, so people who could get sick if they come in contact with the virus, is much less than compared to coronavirus, because we have experience. We have experience and we've been in contact with influenza, while coronavirus or SARS-CoV-2 is new and we don't have the experience. We don't have any opportunity how to defend ourselves against it with our previous exposure to the virus. That's why it spreads faster, probably faster than the influenza.
Actually, coming back to the vaccines, Irina asks us on YouTube why certain microbes, bacteria, and viruses have vaccines and others don't.
It has something to do with the antigens and the surface, how it looks on the microbes. Because not all of them, when they get you sick, cause a high immunity reaction in your immune cells so that they produce antibodies. Yeah, that's the word. So that your body does not always produce very good antibodies against those surface proteins. And if your body can react to those antigens and to those surface proteins, then we have an opportunity and a possibility to develop a vaccine for this bug and for this microbe and for this bacterium. And for others, we cannot do that, unfortunately. And there is something very interesting, while I have Salmonella here in my hands, what I would like to say. Not all vaccines that can help us humans are actually delivered to humans, because Salmonella is one of the highest foodborne pathogens, and we get it mostly if we eat either raw eggs or if we handle eggs and don't wash our hands and then prepare a salad, and then the Salmonella gets from the egg on the salad and we eat it. One of the biggest successes in reducing the number of people who got sick by Salmonella was actually a vaccine that was administered and delivered to chickens and hens who lay eggs, because this reduced the number of Salmonella on the egg on the surface of the egg, and it reduced our exposure to, let's call it, contaminated eggs, to eggs that carry Salmonella. So we got less opportunity to get in contact with it, and we got less sick. So not all vaccines are only targeted at humans, but some of them can be beneficial for us, but targeted at animals, for instance.
There is also a very interesting question from one of our YouTube listeners. Is the ratio of danger disease versus the research put into it a constant to all diseases?
That is a very good question. And I don't have the exact numbers in that, and I really like numbers, but my feeling and my impression is that yes, the more dangerous a disease is, the more it occupies our minds, both as scientists, but also as politicians and the public and the funding agencies. And if a funding agency is interested in a disease, then it gives you more funds and more money to do research on those diseases. So I would say that, yes, if we perceive that a disease is dangerous, we will invest more money and more effort to try to figure it out and try to find a solution and try to find a cure.
And one final question from YouTube is actually not one, but three. So how does mutations of genetic material influence the severity of a disease? Can bacteria also have genetic mutations? And how often does this happen?
Ah, lovely. Yes. So genetic mutations can happen in every organism that has genetic material. So yes, mutations can happen in bacteria, it can happen in viruses, and it also can happen in protozoa, and it also can happen in ourselves, in humans, in animals, in plants. Everywhere, every living organism that has genetic material can get also genetic mutations. And whether those genetic mutations that happen in viruses or bacteria, whether they cause the disease to be more severe or less severe, it can go both ways, actually. Because, as I've mentioned previously, if the mutation causes the disease to be less severe, the virus or the bacteria has a higher chance of survival and a higher chance of being transmitted to more people and to more animals. But then, on the other hand, yes, some mutations can happen that can cause more severe symptoms and more severe outcomes. And I don't have exactly, it's also an evolutionary aspect, because maybe this mutation will cause a more severe symptom, for instance, coughing more or coughing louder and having really fits of cough, which would actually benefit the virus again in an evolutionary term, because it will get spread faster and it would get spread further away. So some of those can have this kind of influence as well. And the third question was,
how often does this happen?
How often does it happen? That depends on the organism that we're looking at. Some organisms mutate faster and acquire mutations faster, and some organisms acquire mutations slower. That depends, for instance, on the genetic material that is the source of your blueprint, let's call it. If you have DNA, then you, compared to RNA, you have a lower mutation rate. So RNA mutates faster compared to DNA. And then there is also a difference within the organism, not only among the organisms, because if you have a very important gene in your body, that is very important for your survival or for your metabolism, for how you process food, for instance, these genes will be more, we call it, conserved, because they will not acquire mutations as often, and they will not get fixed in the population as often as in parts of the genome that are not so relevant for the immediate survival of the organism.
And do you think the coronavirus will mutate every year like the flu virus does?
Oh, that's a different kind of, we cannot really compare it this way, because the flu virus, why it mutates so often, one of the reasons is because the flu virus has not just one genetic material that it carries with itself, it has 7 different chunks of genetic material that it carries with itself. So these 7 cards can be played among different viruses much faster than one chunk of RNA or DNA that you carry with yourself. So in this way, flu virus and influenza virus mutates much faster than the coronavirus because this fact, they have 7 cards that they can play, while coronavirus has just 1.
And just because this is everywhere in the news, do you think we'll have a second wave?
Well, if we don't have a vaccine against the virus, so we don't have an opportunity how to stop it differently. So I presume that we will most likely have a second wave. But the second wave can also be, if we behave with physical distancing, taking into account physical distancing measures, if we take into account having our masks all the time, if we are very mindful about our environment and about our symptoms as well, how we feel, and if we behave accordingly. So if I feel a little bit sickish, if I feel a little bit Halskratzen in German, then it would be better if I stay home, and this way I can contribute to flattening the curve and lowering the probability to infect other people. I will not go to school, I would not go to work, and I would stay home to see whether it develops into more severe symptoms and get tested, of course. So I think we will most probably have a second wave, but if we all continue to behave responsibly, we can help lower also the impact the second curve might have on ourselves and on the society.
Thank you so much, DJ. And thank you all for participating in our pageant and for asking all of these questions.